So who are we talking about? We are talking about Dan Lanning running the Oregon Ducks program. He just got paid again, a big extension announced by the school. Congrats to Dan Lanning. He has been a dear friend since he was a GA at Arizona State. I can remember way back in the day, Jim, being at Camp Tontozona, doing a docu-series on Todd Graham called The Drive back in the day. And I'm just hanging out talking to this young, skinny GA who just had this infectious personality coming out of Kansas City, just a cool young man. We're talking on the field. We kept a friendship all the way through. A couple years ago, named the head coach at Oregon, has thrived with that program, taking them to very unique heights in this era of college football. Now his career goes to a new height in this era. College football reported close to $11 million per season. Congratulations to Dan Lanning. The buyout is huge. So the big news, the news that really matters is for Oregon Duck fans, Dan Lanning, who famously said last year, the grass is pretty damn green in Eugene. He is tripling down on that. He's not going anywhere. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, he's now one of the highest paid coaches in all of college football, and deservedly so. Even though he's still, I mean, it's crazy to think that he's still a very young head coach. He's 35-6 in his 3 seasons at Oregon, which is mind blowing enough. That's tied for the second most wins by a head coach in their first 3 seasons as a head coach. The only person that ever had more wins in their first 3 seasons as a head coach was Lincoln Riley in his first 3 years there at Oklahoma. He's tied with Chris Peterson his first 3 years at Boise, Larry Coker at Miami, Bob Pruitt at Marshall. You look at the landscape of all of college football in these last 3 years. Only Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan won more games than Oregon did in that span. So that just tells you where he's at. All 6 of the, I mentioned 35-6. All 6 of those losses were to teams that were ranked. 4 of those 6 were to teams that were ranked in the top 7. So if when they're playing against teams that they should beat, they do. That's, to me, that's always a sign of a good thing. 4-4 against top 10 teams over those 3 seasons. I mean, it's hard to do better than that. Won a Big Ten championship the first year. He's got the Heisman winners, Heisman finalists the last 2 years at quarterback. It's pretty impressive what he's done. And it's funny because, I mean, obviously you have that connection with him back to those Arizona State days. I can remember the first time really getting to meet him was, not long after he got hired with Oregon, and we were at the Pac-12 and doing coaches meetings. And this is before even his first spring ball. And we would be taught, or maybe it was right around, right in that around that time line. And it was when we were all talking about okay, the Pac-12 is going to go from the North and the South divisions to the 1 division and stuff like that. So that kind of puts the time frame on it. But we have those meetings, and then you and I went to the draft that year to go talk to Kayvon Thibodeau, among others. Drake London was also in that among that first rounders. But you talked to some of the Georgia kids that were getting drafted that first round, and they couldn't. I mean, they were all raving about Dan.
All defensive players.
All defensive. All those dudes. I think they're all
for the Eagles.
They're all in the Eagles now, but it was just funny because thinking of that time. And and seeing, and he was gracious enough at the draft to then give us some time, even though we didn't really know, especially on my end, didn't really know that well. But I remember seeing him. He goes, "Hey, you're the guy with the tiebreakers, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the tiebreaker guy." So it was just funny. But I mean, he's such a obviously loved by his players. You can see that. On the field, during the games, the relationship, you can see that relationship with the players, and you hear them all talk about him after the fact, referencing those Georgia players that we talked to at the draft. So I think it's nowhere to go but up, and there's not really much up for him to go, so it's going to be interesting to continue to track what he's going to do, because what he's already done at Oregon is just incredible.
Yeah. And I just think that coaching wise, he's in the conversation among the best in the game right now. If we rewind the clock, a year and change ago, we said something on this show that I think has really been captured by a lot of people and echoed by a lot of people, which we love, which was with Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL, Nick Saban retiring, there was a lot of oxygen in college football available to a head coach. And I've said this for decades. The NFL is known by your quarterback. Think of all of your favorite teams, you think of the quarterback for probably 90% of them. In college, you think of the head coach for 99% of them. And we projected that Dan Lanning was going to take up a lot of that oxygen. And he did. And he didn't do it in a way where he was trying to bulldoze his way in. He was just him. And I think for a lot of people outside of probably the West Coast think that, oh, put anybody at Oregon. And you've got Phil Knight, you've got the brand of Nike, and you're just going to win. And I'm here to tell you that that is completely and utterly false. Completely and utterly false in this era. I get that they've got all the resources. A lot of teams have resources. I think you have to have the ability to, what Dan Lanning would coin, land and really push on what he coins his DNA traits: connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice. The connection piece is the biggest one. You can bring in 30, 40, 50 players at every program around the country every year. That's pretty much what happens now in major college football. But how are you able to, amid time restriction, because that still exists in college football, how are you able to still connect to your players? Head coach to player, assistant to player, player to player. That is a challenge. Campus, university to the players, whether you're talking about Nike to the players, you look at what they're doing with their NIL collective to the players. Like, it is not a transactional environment there. I've been there so often, as you know, Jim, especially over the course of the last couple of seasons with Dan Lanning being there and watching this in real time. And I just think that's what makes him special. It's a transient world. It's easy, because we've seen it before, for a head coach at Oregon to say, I'm going to go to Florida State. I'm going to go to Miami. I'm going to go somewhere else. Dan Lanning's never been about that. I believe this, and we did the story on it. When his wife was diagnosed with cancer, that not only rocked him as it would rock anybody, but it really impacted his lens on the craft of football and on what matters most. I say that phrase all the time on this show. Like, do you have clarity around what matters most? And he wants to raise his family and do it in Eugene. And he wants to create a level of consistency where you can win at a premier level. I think that's what's so unique about him, is the clarity he has on what matters most, how he loves being in that community, how he pours into that team, but he also recognizes that everybody needs to value the connection first among one another, among the people that are in your familial group, whatever it might be. That's allowing this team to thrive. And I really think they're just getting warmed up. Like, they're just getting going. He and Marshall Malchow, like that whole front office there, the staff there. You look at Will Stein, what Kenny Dillingham did now at Arizona State. Like, it is a launching pad for assistants. It is dramatically attractive for people to come to, whether you're players or coaches. And now Dan Lanning has confirmed he's not going anywhere, which I think is just amazing for him. And I think it's great for college football in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, you look at how they've recruited, especially these last couple of years. The class of 2024, they were the third overall. Class of 2025, the fifth overall. Right now, I mean, obviously things will change between now and whenever signing day is, or whatever we call signing day. By the time we get to signing day, right now they're second overall as far in the nation as far as class. So this is something that just continues to build and build and build. And like, to your point before about talking about the Nike thing, if you want to think about, like, sure, did that help from where that school was in the 80s, to then through the Bilotti years and everything to help build that up. But once you get to that level, you have to be good to stay at that level. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's just about this, because to your point, lots of programs have resources and money and stuff like that. You have to know how to use them, and also just be good and authentic. Otherwise, because we've seen times where it hasn't really worked out as well there. So I think he is the right guy for the job in Eugene.
Yeah, absolute home run, Rob Mullins. Congrats to you and the staff. Dan Lanning not going anywhere as he continues to build the Oregon Ducks into a perennial powerhouse, which really they've been for the better part of our adult lives, from the end of the Bilotti era, Chip, and away they go. Helfrich takes him to the national championship. Mario Cristobal got it going again at a really premier level, and then Dan Lanning's taken it even further.